Basque pianist, Spanish pianist, European pianist, global traveler, as musicians are, citizen of the world. You just played for us some really precious, beautiful music from the Basque country by a composer that we don't know here in the United States, but we're finding out more thanks to you. And the recording you just made by Aita Donostia, a person who had a very interesting life, it seems, from what I understood. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more first about who this composer was and when he lived and what drove him to compose, to set this music down and elevate it.
Donostia was a great composer, great researcher, and great folklorist. If I had to really show one of the characteristics of his career, of his entire life, I would say that he was a very modern person in that time. He is still modern nowadays, but one has to imagine in his historic context how a priest at the beginning of the 20th century can ask for permission to go to Madrid and to Paris in that time, to be in touch with the most modern cutting-edge tendencies, to elaborate and to make the compositions, the majority of them out of the Basque folklore that he himself collects and he arranges, and he publishes one of the most important songs books that never have been done in a folk music like the one in the Basque Country.
Would you say that his approach was similar to that of other ethnomusicologists, perhaps? We think of Kodai, of Bartók, of maybe even Percy Grainger and others.
Well, I would say ethnomusicology today in 2014. I think at that time it didn't exist the term ethnomusicologist. I would say folklorist.
Okay.
I think is one has to be in that context to understand the nationalism in the whole Europe continent. I mean, we have to think in Chopin in Poland, in Glinka in Russia, in Smetana in Czechoslovakia, in Kodai and Bartók in Hungary. Of course, what they did was to discover that there was a popular culture, a fantastic popular culture that could be like a little basis to build up the whole building of their compositions.
It also relates to cultural identity. And defining what it is to be of a certain place.
Yes, but at the same time, they defend their own culture, their local culture, but they elaborate it in an international way, with the most important tendencies of the musical language of that time. We have to think, it's nice to think about what Manuel de Falla does, also what Béla Bartók does with the Hungarian folklore. I mean, of course, they take the roots of the popular music, but they create chords like the major minor chord in 1928 by Béla Bartók, or the clashes that Stravinsky uses for his compositions. We have to think that Petrushka is written out of a folklore theme, many folklore themes. So it is to admire the local and the popular culture, but they develop it with the most cutting edge and the most advanced languages of the time.
So in terms of identity, and Spain is a very, of course, multicultural country, entity. What would you say is Basque music? Is Basque music Spanish music, or is Basque music entirely unrelated to what we think of as Spanish music?
I cannot put a border in any of the cultures. I mean, I would say, of course, Basque music has his own identity, but you cannot make an island such as you cannot make an island with Hungarian culture. Mm-hmm. It is inside of the Romanian territory. Our Romanian music is inside the Hungarian. I mean, the relationship of a living body work like the folklore is very difficult to define. But of course, there are characteristics that can define the peculiarities of the Basque music and the Basque folklore, such as there are a lot of writings of Aita Donostia where he explains the characteristics even of the Basque people and how they are related to the music. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But to put limits, I think, is very difficult.
So in the piece that you played, which translates as dialogue,
yeah,
which is sort of apt, considering that it seems like we are in a dialogue of, what is actually Basque and how does that influence perhaps other parts of Spanish music, and how does Spanish music influence Basque music. How would you describe this piece, and as a Basque person yourself, how, what is it, what does it mean to you? Is this based on a popular melody that you know separately from this work?
In this piece, you can hear that it's a slow melody, which is very romantic style. I mean, the majority of the Basque folklore is this way. Usually are sad songs. Donostia says that maybe it's because of the weather, because it's always raining, because it is very foggy all the time, and so on. Because the Basque people live in the mountains. So he creates this relationship between these characteristics and the ones of the folklore. Of course, it's a Basque melody, but the influence that I would say concretely in this piece is not Spanish, it is French. I mean, the way it is treated in impressionistic way, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I am sure that it's the influence of the French composers of the time. One has to think that due to the aesthetic of Donostia, he's much more influenced by the French culture than by the Spanish one. Mm. Because at that time, there was the neo-modal language out of Gabriel Fauré, and used by Claude Debussy, Eric Satie, etc. And this fitted much better with the idea and with the creations that he wanted to produce. So in my opinion, I would say 100% that the real influence of Donostia when he elaborates his compositions with the Basque folklore come from France, not from Spain.
Interesting. Now, most people don't realize that part of the Basque country does extend into France on the other side of the Pyrenees Mountains. Sure. And that one of France's greatest composers was Basque also, part Basque anyway, Maurice Ravel. Sure. And Maurice Ravel seems to have had an influence on Donostia's life as well. What's the story?
Not only an influence, but also a friendship, a very nice friendship. The story is, I think we are mixing up two different things. One is the cultural word, and another is the political word.
Sure.
If we talk about Basque culture, we can define exactly what Basque culture is, because there is an identity of Basque feeling and Basque culture. But when we talk, if this is in Spain or is in France, we are talking from a political point of view. So there we are creating limits that doesn't allow us to explain the richness that this culture has. Mm-hmm. My opinion is better to speak culturally,
right?
Because it's going to be much easier and better communicated the way this culture is. Mm-hmm. So that's why Maurice Ravel, in one of the letters that he writes in 1920 to Eugène Couls, his teacher in Paris, he asks Renkuls that there is an abbot called Aita Donostia that asked him for advice. He wanted to, Aita Donostia wanted to show his music to Ravel, and Ravel was a bit scared because he thought it was gonna be a very monastic music, because this abbot, he had been in a monastery for so many years, and he had a surprise. He said, "It's a fantastic music. It just requires some indications or some advices to improve it, but it's a fantastic composer." So he asked Renkuls to help him, because Maurice Ravel, he has so much work to do that doesn't have time.
Right.
But in that letter, Maurice Ravel explains a compatriot of mine, the Basque abbot Aita Donostia, and he explains, because you must know that Basque people, we have two different countries. So there you can find also the feeling as a Basque identity that Maurice Ravel has.
Right, which is fascinating. So just for factual information, what are Aita Donostia's dates, birth and death?
He was born in 1886.
Okay.
And he died 1956.
Okay. Okay, and he lived mostly in the Basque country?
Yes, exactly, in the north of the territory of Navarra.
Okay.
But he traveled a lot. I mean, he used to go to Madrid and to Paris many, many times.
And so you also had a very meaningful friendship with Manuel de Falla.
Yeah.
And they exchanged many letters. And
yeah.
What was de Falla's take, if you know, on Donostia's music?
I think the way he elaborated the harmonizations of the folk songs. I mean, the admiration of Donostia when he listened to the Siete Canciones Populares, 7 folk songs by Manuel de Falla. It's obvious, and it is written in the letters. And he uses a lot of ideas that takes out of Manuel de Falla's music.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because we have to think that, of course, Falla collects the cantejondo and all the flamenco culture.
So that's more southern Spanish culture.
Yes, Andalusia. Yeah. It is in the south of Spain.
Right.
Very rich
culture.
culture.
The opposite end of the country.
Exactly. It's almost 1,000 kilometers in the south.
Yeah.
And what does Manuel de Falla is to use also the influence of Maurice Ravel. The way he does the orchestrations is very similar to Ravel. And also the most cutting edge tendencies of the time. It's a very modern music.
So now that you've come out with this project, do you think it's going to have an impact on Basque musicians from 2014 and into the future, as they rediscover their own heritage? Do you think this is contributing something? Yeah. And you think that Donostia is going to become, maybe is he a father figure for Basque music?
Absolutely. Because he has been known much more for the religious music. One has to think that at that time there was a very important reorganization of all the chant Gregorian. So Donostia had to work a lot on it. And maybe these religious compositions and choir compositions and all the liturgy stuff really transcended, but not these non-religious compositions. Which are, in my opinion, very modern and very, very important for the international piano repertoire, let's say.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So what is Basque music today in the classical sense? You probably know a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
You work with contemporary composers.
Yeah, there are very, very good composers in this time, of course, and it's difficult to identify them as a Basque composers, because they are very much in tendencies where you cannot find the concrete elements of the Basque popular culture. But I think it must be this way in this period.
Interesting. I'd like to know more about you, Josu. Tell me a little bit about your background. What led you to become a musician? What did your family encourage you? Are you born in a musical environment, or how did you find the piano?
Yeah. Well, my mom, my grandmom, they were pianists. Not professionally, but very musical way. My father is a very musical too. And since I was a child, I knew the piano because it was in the house. So when I was 3, I went to the piano and started playing what my sister used to play. And they didn't let me play because you are going to break the piano. So. But one day I went there and I started playing one Chopin waltz because I heard it to my sister.
Wow.
And then they had a little shock and they say, okay, then we have to let him go and play. And that's the way I started, with a teacher, with solfege and all the stuff. And when I was 16, I went to Madrid to study with Félix Lavilla, a great musician and pianist in Spain that came from the Basque Country. And he had been playing many times for hands with Aita Donostia.
Oh, really?
They were great friends. And through him, I knew Aita Donostia.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What a privilege to have that connection.
Yes. Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah.
Wow.
He died last year, and that's why the city is dedicated to him.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. And so, how many years did you study in Madrid?
Then I was 5 years in Madrid.
Okay.
With him, and then I moved to New York to Juilliard because I started the contact with Oksana Yablonskaya.
Of course.
It was a very nice experience there, but then I got the possibility to play for Maria Curcio.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, one of the greatest pianists and teacher in the 20th century, a former student of Arthur Schnabel. And then I decided to stay next to Maria 5 years in London, and that was really a very, very interesting period. I played sometimes these musics for Maria, and she was really, really impressed when she listened to it, because she had never listened to Aita Donostia. I mean, she knew some Spanish repertoire through Rafael Orozco, of course, one of the greatest students of Maria, and one of the greatest pianists in Spain. But it was a very, very nice experience to be next to Maria so many years.
Well, so the world of pianists is a small world, and there are not that many families. And I, very briefly, unfortunately, but still, I had the chance to work a little bit with Maria Curcio, who, as you said, was a pupil of Arthur Schnabel, like Leon Fleischer in the United States, and that carries its own weight because, of course, Schnabel is down the line from Beethoven, Czerny, Leschetizky, and really an interesting lineage.
Yes.
Since we're also in this beautiful pianoforte studios here in Chicago, and the piano is a central focus, maybe we can talk a little bit about Maria's approach and what you did get from her over those 5 years. What would you say stays with you the most as really valuable lessons?
Her thought. When I go to the piano, she's it's very difficult to explain this feeling, but she's inside my mind. I mean, the approach that I have now to the sound, to the structure of the piece, to make sound out of the score. I mean, there is a very strong presence of Maria in me.
So I'm sure you had a chance to talk with her about her experience with Schnabel. What do you think she took from that, and what do you think she then made her own?
I think the most important thing that she learned from Schnabel was that she had to be herself. And that's the most difficult thing that one teacher can teach. Because many teachers, what they do is to impose to the student how you have to play. And no, you have to give the tools to the student to let him be himself. There you make a free student, a free pianist. And that's very difficult. I don't know if you understand.
Yeah, I do. The freedom, it's the finding one's voice.
You have to find your own way. I mean, I don't know if the interpretation you do is good or bad, but it is yours.
And Maria was able to convey that to her students.
Absolutely.
So all her students around the world today are all very unique.
I hope so.
You think so also?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, she was very clear. And when she spoke about the structure was an objective thing. Okay, but let's think, sound is personal. Rubato is personal. So she didn't tell you how to do the rubato. She used to tell you, you have to do rubato. But there are many ways to do it. Find yours.
Right.
And this is very rare to find.
Is there an anecdote about her as a person that sticks in your mind?
Many.
What would be something that would describe her in to people who don't know, did not know Maria Corcho?
Imagination. Unbelievable. She always had new ideas. Always.
Yeah.
You could play for her doesn't matter, the Chopin concerto, Beethoven concerto, Schumann Papillon, or Carnival, whatever. 1,000 times. She always had something new to tell you. That was for me something amazing. The experience that she had with sound.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's the nature of art and interpretation.
Yeah.
So, as a touring pianist, and you've been doing this for a few years. What's your perception at the moment of the evolution of the field of music and performance?
In my opinion, the world is changing too fast, let's say, a lot. The evolution is huge. But although we have been immersed in a terrible crisis, economical crisis, in my opinion, the culture, the music, is a necessity such as food. We cannot say, no, look, this is luxury. No, this is something for rich people. No. This is something that all of us we need. Let's think about the primitive human being, what they do in the caves when they draw. We need culture. We are human beings, so we need food, but we need too culture. We cannot say that culture is, no, after food. Of course we need to eat to survive, but culture too.
Where do you think you will be in 20 or 30 years, and what do you think you would like to be doing at that time?
Me?
Yeah.
I would like to go on in this way and finding every day. I mean, for me, the real prize of this career is being myself every day.
Are you yourself every day?
Yes. At least I try it when I play. I don't know if I do it well or bad, but I do it my way.
Is there anything that you'd like to add to this conversation at this point?
Just I would like to thank to Chicago and to thank to you, of course, this possibility to present this music that I think is great. If we don't communicate, we don't exist. So art exists just when we have the possibility to communicate it, and this is what I want to thank you. And what I want to thank to Chicago, having opened the hands to this music.
Thank you, Josu.
My pleasure.
Maybe we can leave off with some music.
Yeah,
I don't know if you want to do more Dinastia or maybe Defaya or something. It's your choice.
I would like to finish with one of the preludes by Donostia.
Okay, which is called...
Ilargitan emaste kallanerons.
And
which means singing, looking at the moon.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Counterpoint. For advertising and sponsorship opportunities, please visit internationalbeethovenproject.com. I'm George Lepauw, host and producer. Thank you for listening.